Welcome back. All right, so it's power rankings time, and it's my birthday, so I really did want to get videos done relatively quickly and get done relatively early tonight, so I don't know, watch some TV that's not hockey after 12 hours of hockey today. So with all the hockey I hockeyed with hockey today, and it does get to the point where I'm going to say this too. It does get to the point sometimes where your eyes kind of glass over, and you're like, "Whew, that's a lot of hockey." And I was at that point during the Oilers Kings game, but I survived. So now we've got the power rankings. First power rankings I've done in a couple of weeks. Last week, of course, I did something a little different because it was the All Star break and most teams weren't playing. I did track those games. I did keep those games in context for this week's power rankings. So those games were not forgotten. All right, so starting off for this week at number 32, same spot as last week, Chicago. The Blackhawks, the work ethic is there. I think Luke Richardson has them playing as well as he can, but the top end talent isn't there. So I will be interested to see when Bedard returns. I knew I was going to say Berard at some point. Didn't think it'd be a power rankings video, but here we are. When Bedard returns, I think we'll see some more offense from them and maybe some better results. But they've lost so many games to this point, it's probably not going to affect their draft lottery chances that much. Number 31, dropping one spot from where they were 2 weeks ago, and that is the San Jose Sharks. So for the Sharks, they dropped the one spot. We'll see if they have any kind of upward momentum coming out of the All-Star break. But yeah, at this point, 31, I did see them live. That was such a fun game. It's such a fun game when you're able to watch two teams that you don't see live at all or very often. You get to watch them play against each other. If you ever have a chance to do that, you go to like a neutral location and you don't really care who wins between two teams in most cases. It's a lot of fun. But anyways, yeah, San Jose had less fun, and they are 31st this week. Number 30, moving up one spot from last week. Go ahead and move him off to the side. Number 30 this week, Anaheim. So Anaheim moves up one spot. So they were 32. Now they're 30. So 32, 31, 30. So if we have another 30 weeks to the season, maybe they end up being number one by the end of it. There isn't 31 or 30 weeks left in the season. I'm actually glad there isn't 30 weeks left in the season. This is only week 17 of the power rankings as well. So, yeah, Anaheim moves up to one spot. I think they're playing well. They're not playing well enough to win. So, but they're playing relatively well lately. Number 29, dropping one spot from last week, the Sabres. Buffalo, you know the story with Buffalo. The expectations this year was for them to at least be competitive. They haven't been. They're not getting the scoring that they had counted on this season, and it's been kind of an ugly year. So Buffalo drops the one spot. They were 27, then they were 28. This week they're 29, so 32 before the end of the season maybe. I don't know. Number 28, dropping two spots from last week. Columbus. The Blue Jackets dropped two spots. They're down to number 28. They were 29, then they were 26, now they're 28. So they're just lingering around in different spots in that bottom row. But yeah, for Columbus tonight, they wake up late. And, now they're not a team that's blowing leads. Now they're a team that's having to try to make comebacks. Just finding that consistent effort through three periods has been a real challenge for them this year. Number 27, staying in the same spot as they were. I'm trying to change up the pucks at least a little bit here, and that's Montreal. So Montreal stays in the same spot as they were 2 weeks ago. I don't see any reason to move them up. I don't see any reason to move them down. They are still in the bottom row, but they're still ahead of five other teams. Montreal's winning enough games to stay ahead of some teams, and we'll see if they can get any kind of a run going. But the expectation is they're going to be sellers, and we'll see who ends up getting moved. Number 26, moving up three spots from last week. They're not going to be a playoff team, obviously, but Ottawa, they made a little bit of a dent in Toronto's game. So the idea that Ridley Gregg would take a slapper like that, well, players like beating Toronto. We've seen this throughout this season. I've noticed this, that when a team beats Toronto, there's a little more swagger in those players on the other team. It's just a thing where players, I think teams try harder against Toronto. And so, yeah, I think that's what we were seeing with Ottawa tonight was that excitement of, hey, we're not going to make the playoffs, but we've beaten Toronto 3 out of 4 games this year. So for Ottawa, I mean, it's a moral victory, but they need a lot more than moral victories right now. They need to go on a nice long run of victories, and I don't know if this team can do it, but they were impressive tonight. Number 25, dropping 2 spots from last week. Arizona. So the Coyotes are down in the bottom row. They might have got their way out of the bottom row tonight if not for losing that 2-goal lead against Nashville. Definitely made it easier to have them in the bottom row with that. The talent's there. I think this is a good team. They should finish around 500, which is where they are now. And it's about building blocks. The team on the ice and the way this team's been put together, I think, is good. It's just a matter of showing that growth. Gunther's been looking really good lately. They need more goals from Cooley, but again, these are your young guys you're building around, and there's still more young guys coming up for Arizona. So we're done the bottom row. No arguments yet? Of course there are. Number 24, moving up 1 spot from last week. So it's just the 1 spot move, but Minnesota's out of the bottom row. Minnesota's had trouble getting out of the bottom row. Here they are. We'll see whether or not they stay up. They haven't played like fantastic hockey, but they've got a couple of wins. They're back to NHL 500 as well. I would put them ahead of Arizona at this stage, obviously, because I have, but not by a lot, because they're right there. We'll see if Minnesota can get on a little bit of a run and reward Bill Guerin for his faith in the team, or if Guerin's going to have to make some decisions at the deadline. I know that most of their players are signed beyond this season. I don't know if we're going to see contract lengths beyond this season being a major impediment to trades. It might just mean you have to, I don't know, make a hockey trade. But anyways, we'll see what Minnesota does. Number 23, dropping 1 spot from last week, the Washington Capitals. So the Capitals, the win over Boston today prevented them from dropping further, is really what that did. That win against Boston today was impressive. They need more. They need a lot more. Washington needs to get on a bit of a run of their own. It's great that Ovechkin's got a 4-game goal streak going now. It's a matter of, how far can you go with this and whether or not the effort they showed against Boston today is an indication that they're ready to go on a run, or if that was just they were able to shut Boston down, and how they'll do tomorrow against Vancouver could be very telling. Back-to-back games. If they can dominate Vancouver the way they dominated Boston today, A, it would show Washington hates me, which, and B, it would really show that they deserve to be moved up, and they would absolutely move up tomorrow. But, again, those are early games, too. Number 22, moving up 2 spots from last week. Not a huge move up, but it's a move up. The Islanders. The Islanders are 3-3-1 under Patrick Roy, which is right around how they were playing before he got there. But they're definitely playing different. And it feels like the Islanders, once they buy into the systems and once they've got this figured out, they could be a very dangerous team. But they're in transition right now and got beat today. So we'll see whether or not they're able to overcome the distance between themselves and the playoffs. They looked great against Tampa, and then today against Calgary, they just weren't able to keep that level of intensity up. Although Calgary, they got their own level of intensity too. Thus, I'm wearing a Flames jersey and all that. Number 21, dropping 4 spots from last week. 4 spots. Seattle. For the Kraken, down to number 21. They're down to 1 game above NHL 500. Seattle's been hit and miss, and it looked like with that big winning streak that maybe this team was going to get themselves above the playoff line and stay there. They've faded again since then. So for Seattle, they're back outside of the top 20. We'll see whether or not they're able to get back up there. But it's going to require, I think, some moves made by Ron Francis. I think they need a trade, and I'm not sure what that trade would look like, but I think they need a trade to get themselves going. Number 20, dropping 1 spot from last week. Just the 1 spot. New Jersey. The New Jersey Devils are flirting with missing the playoffs. They're, I think, 5 points out of the playoffs. I know they were 6 points out coming in, and they got a point tonight. But I'm not sure if that means they gained a point or not. At any rate, New Jersey's below the playoff line, and it is increasingly looking like they're not going to make it. So What that means to the team, whether or not they just look and go, we had a bunch of injuries, whatever happens, we'll see. They obviously need a goaltender. That move has not happened yet. And we might almost be to the point in the season now where it's like, what's it going to do? Like, are you going to get enough wins from changing out the goaltender? And then if you get wins after changing the goaltender and you fall just short of the playoffs, doesn't that reflect on the GM not making the move soon enough? So anyways, we'll see what happens with the Devils. Number 19, also dropping one spot from last week, the Pittsburgh Penguins. So for the Penguins, they dropped the one spot. They did beat Winnipeg, and then they lost to Winnipeg. Pittsburgh, a one up, one down. It's not going to work very well for them. Jari's playing great. Nedeljkovic is playing very well too. So the goaltending's there. And tonight they just couldn't get that second goal when they needed it. So Pittsburgh and Washington, both in similar positions here, needing to get some wins to get themselves above the playoff line. And in the East, that's going to be increasingly difficult as the weeks go by. So we'll see if Pittsburgh has a big week upcoming. They're going to need it. Number 18, moving up 2 spots from last week, the LA Kings. So the Kings dropped to 20th. They've now risen to 18th, and in between when I had them in 20th 2 weeks ago and now, I've met people from LA. I did talk to a couple, and so I would like to apologize for putting the Kings at first in the power rankings, because apparently when I put the Kings first in the power rankings, there was a reaction of, oh no. So I'm not kidding. I was told there was a reaction of, oh no, that great, now we're gonna fall apart. And so there was some blame thrown on me for having the Kings too high in the power rankings. So now they're 18th. They got a win tonight against Edmonton in a shutout. I'm going to try really hard not to put LA too high in the power rankings, and I don't want to make people in LA mad. So yeah, LA, number 18 this week. So there you go. Number 17. It just, when I'm actually talking to people in person about my power rankings, it's always weird to me. I'm like, man, they really do pay attention to these. Number 17, and dropping 3 spots from last week, is Nashville. Nashville's outside of the top 16 for the first time in what feels like months. It feels like it's been forever. But yeah, they need more wins. They did have the comeback victory against Arizona, but troubling that you're down 2 goals against Arizona in the third at home and you need that comeback victory. But for Nashville, coming out of the All-Star break, if they can get more wins than they have losses, should they make it? Yeah, I think they should end up being above the playoff line. But again, they're going to need some help from St. Louis. They're going to need some help from LA, who again got the win tonight and looked a heck of a lot better than they have in a long time. So Nashville still needs some help to get above the playoff line. I wouldn't be surprised if they sneak in. Getting into the top 2 rows now. So that's your bottom 16. Drink it in. Number 16 this week. Moving up 5 spots. 5 spots from last week is Calgary. So yep, the Flames, the jersey I'm wearing being Calgary and all that, they move up 5 spots from last week. They were 21st. Now they're 16th. Had a great week. Absolutely great week. Beating Boston, beating the Islanders. Just whoever you throw at them right now, they're winning. I think it's a 5-game winning streak for Calgary. It's 4 or 5. And they're playing the best hockey they have all season. So for Calgary, they're in the top 16. We'll see if they keep moving up. They're just below the playoff line in the West. And I understand they've played more games than some of the teams you're chasing. Don't worry about it. The teams that have got less games played have to play more. They have a busier schedule. It doesn't necessarily mean they win those games in hand. So all you can do is go out and win the games that you have in your schedule. Number 15, same spot as last week, the Blues. So St. Louis stays in the same spot that they were last week, 15th. They're currently in a playoff spot. And I think if St. Louis and Calgary were the wild card teams, I wouldn't necessarily be entirely surprised by that. But again, you've got the Kings, you've got the Preds. This is kind of fun. 4 teams in a row from the West who are all kind of on that cusp of maybe they do, maybe they don't. So St. Louis is in that realm as well. They got themselves a victory today, and tomorrow they're playing against the Montreal Canadiens. A game that, again on paper looks winnable, but Montreal's 1 game below 500. They really like being 500. So we'll see what happens there. All right, number 14, dropping 5 spots from last week. Tampa Bay. The Bolts, as good as they looked going into the All-Star break, like they looked fantastic. They've looked just as bad coming out of the All-Star break. Now, they did win the game against Columbus tonight. Was it pretty? Was it a full 60 minutes? Not really. So for Tampa Bay, I do have some concerns about the Lightning where they're at right now. They're not out of the woods when it comes to being above that playoff line. And some of those results this week, not necessarily great. So, yes, they finished the week with a win, but I did not move them up as a result of that win. It's against Columbus, who are down at 28th. So, we'll see how Tampa Bay does this week. But they desperately needed a win today. Number 13, dropping one spot from last week, Toronto. So, the Toronto Maple Leafs dropped one spot. They're down to 13th. The loss against Ottawa tonight is troubling. I didn't feel that it was troubling enough for me to move them down beyond 13th. Toronto, it's going to be an interesting upcoming week, because if they have similar results to what they had tonight, they will probably find themselves outside the top 16 next week. So, but again, I don't want to overreact to a game or two here and there coming out of the All-Star break. We'll see how they do this upcoming week. Number 12, also dropping one spot from last week, Dallas. Dallas, the inconsistency with this team is interesting, because Dallas is first in their division. So if Dallas gets their game together and plays like I know they can, this is a team that could be very, very dangerous in the playoffs. So on some level, as a Dallas fan, I'm kind of like, if they're going to have a hard time now. Have some inadequacy in games here and there now, and then later on you're good. But right now I have them at 12th on the board. I'm just hoping that when we're going to the playoffs, they're in the top row. I'd like to see all three of my favorite teams in the top row. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that'd be a first. That's never happened going into the playoffs. Number 11, moving up 5 spots from last week. Yep, 5. 5 whole spots. The Flyers. So the Flyers last week dropped 8 spots. Or 2 weeks ago, they dropped 8 spots. They dropped 8 spots because they looked like they were done. They were exhausted. Coming out of the All-Star break, they look refreshed. They've got their work ethic back. They're playing really, really well. And so all of this discussion about, so Philly's selling at the deadline. I don't know that they are. Like, I understand there's certain pieces they may sell at the deadline, but I don't think that if you're the general manager of the Flyers, you want to do a full sell. Their penalty kill's really good. Their goaltending's been better than advertised. They're doing quite well, and I do wonder. I'm just gonna say this as well. Maybe the fact that the whole Carter Hart thing is done. He's in that whole 2018 scandal, but he's away from the team. Maybe that's part of the uncertainty. I don't know. Just speculating that maybe there were some players, maybe there were some with the teams who knew what was going to happen, and so maybe there was some concern with that as we got close to that. But anyways, whatever the reason, Philadelphia is playing better. It's fun to see. I want to see the Flyers in the playoffs. Number 10, dropping 3 spots from last week, Jets. So the Jets get the win tonight over Pittsburgh, but the Jets still having trouble scoring. They only got 2 goals tonight. So yes, they got the win. Hellebuck helped them steal that win. They're just not scoring right now, and I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if this is a confidence thing. I don't know if it's they need to change up the lines, what it is. I trust Rick Bowness to get it all figured out. But, Winnipeg dropping down out of the top row. I didn't anticipate that. They were number 1 at one point on this board. In fact, this might be the year where I've seen the most teams at number 1 on my power rankings of all the seasons. And yes, I still have that data, and yes, I'm going to keep tracking that data, and there's going to be some fun videos on that in the upcoming months. But anyways, number 10, Winnipeg this week. They just have to get back into the swing of things with scoring. Number 9, dropping 3 spots from last week, Colorado. The Avs have lost 4 in a row. The Avs right now do not feel like the contending team they should. That game against Florida, once Florida had the 2-0 lead, that game was kind of done. Like, I know Bobrovsky played really, really well, but Colorado's not playing well. And I don't know what the funk is about. I don't know if it's they're coming out of the All-Star break and these things happen. Every team has their rough patches during the season, but for Colorado, they're right out of the top row this week, which is a big surprise to me. Number 8, moving up 5 spots from last week. Definitely a good week for the Rangers. The New York Rangers are back, and this is something I would tell the fans of the Jets, the Stars, Colorado. Look at the Rangers. The Rangers looked lost for weeks, and now they just look back. Tampa Bay looked back too going into the All-Star break. I think it just shows what that fine line is between winning and losing in the National Hockey League. But the Rangers have got it figured out right now, and we'll see how far they can go with it. But they did not lose first place in the midst of all of their trials and tribulations. So good on them for that. The Rangers are back in the top row. They were out of the top row for 2 whole weeks. All right, I guess 3 because I didn't do a power rankings last week. Number 7, moving up 1 spot from last week. I know fans will be like, I think he's forgotten us. Nope, Detroit's number 7. Big comeback victory today over Vancouver. Detroit playing really, really well. Lyon playing quite well in net. Really, Detroit looks like a pretty good team. And in the top row for the second week straight. I'm going to go ahead and say I don't think that's happened in the entire lifetime of this channel. So, yeah, Detroit definitely turning things around. And it feels like this year is really wide open, and that's great. So, good on Detroit. They move up 1 spot this week. Number 6, moving up 4 spots from last week. They're back in the top row. Vegas. The Vegas Golden Knights are... I've referred to them as like Jason Voorhees before, where every time it looks like they're down, they get right back up and they're fine. That's a reference. I think that was 5 years ago that I was making that comment about them. I think their first year, I commented how you think they're down and they're not. This year, Vegas has done that again, although it's a little different. They went through a really, really rough patch there, and then they got Adin Hill back. Adin Hill's been absolutely fantastic. And he's getting them some wins that maybe they shouldn't have. But that's kind of the key thing of having a goalie like that. And they're going to start getting healthier, so they're just going to get more and more into contention. With the struggles of the Kings, with the fact that, the Canucks a little shaky on this road trip, the Oilers losing 2 out of 3, Vegas may end up being that number 1 team in the Pacific, which I'm sure everybody would be completely fine with. Yeah, that's how they feel. Number 5 this week. Same spot as last week, Boston. Now, Boston's a little tricky. Boston loses to Calgary. Boston loses today to Washington, but they beat Vancouver. So they had 1 really, really good game, and they had 2 pretty bad games. Overall, it means they don't move up. They don't really move down either. I will say if this week coming up turns out the same as the one we just experienced, Vegas will pass them, Detroit will pass them, Rangers will pass them, and there's a reason that you have to worry about the teams in the second row. Basically, Boston has to get things picked up. I did see a comment on the channel which was along the lines of, maybe Boston just figured they don't really have to make all the effort. They can just kind of sleepwalk their way to victories. Maybe they might be taking it for granted a little bit. But again, it's an 82-game schedule. You're going to have certain periods of the season where you just don't have it. Maybe that's where Boston's at right now. Maybe they were so focused on that Vancouver game that they overlooked the Washington game. We'll see how this week goes. Number 4, dropping 3 spots from last week. Yep, many apologies, but last week's number 1 is, 2 weeks ago, number 1. This week, number 4, the Edmonton Oilers. So the Oilers dropped 3 spots. They lose the game against Vegas. They lose the game tonight against the Kings. In between, they beat Anaheim, but Anaheim is 30th on the board. So they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt for that win over Anaheim. And against LA, a 4-0 shutout. That's your direct competition. They're trying to get into 3rd in the division again. So we'll see how the Oilers do this week, but they dropped down to number 4 this week. Number 3, dropping 1 spot from last week, Vancouver Canucks. So that's the year of the Dragon puck I got for Vancouver, and I figured this is the only week I can use it. So now I think I've got 4 of these Lunar New Year pucks now. I think so. For the Canucks anyways. I would love to have Lunar New Year pucks for all 32 teams, but that's insanely expensive, so it's not going to happen. Anyways, Vancouver dropping the 1 spot this week. They went 1-1-1 this week, and I feel like that's fair to have them there. They did get the win over Carolina. They looked bad in Boston. They had the lead in Detroit. They couldn't hold the lead in Detroit. So Vancouver falls to number 3. I debated about where to have them on the board, but once Edmonton lost against LA, I knew that I could have Vancouver ahead of Edmonton, and that would make some sense. If Edmonton had won that game against LA, Edmonton would have been 3rd or maybe higher, depending on how that game would have gone if they'd won it, but they didn't. Number 2 on the board this week, moving up 1 spot from last week, the shot suppressors. Carolina Hurricanes. I debated about whether or not to grab a Hartford puck, and I thought, nah, I'll use the Canes one. Hartford might throw people off a little bit. But the Canes, they did have the loss against Vancouver. Vancouver played a masterful game against them. But Carolina tonight played their game against New Jersey. I don't feel like right now they're number one team. It was the debate I had tonight coming out of the games. Where I thought, all right, I like Carolina at 2. I do. The shot suppression's fantastic. Ronta's going to be out for a couple of weeks at least, but Kochetkov looked great. So, yeah, I think for Carolina, I think this season's going to go well throughout. And then it's a question of, do they have a goaltender who can get them through 4 rounds of playoffs and maybe win a Stanley Cup? And I like to remind people that the answer right now, most of us would give is probably not. However, none of us saw Adin Hill's run in the playoffs coming last year. He was the number 3 goaltender in Vegas, behind Logan Thompson, behind Brossoit, and then he wins the Cup. So we'll see if Carolina can pull something off. Maybe Kochetkov can be that guy. He can have a Cam Ward run. Number 1. So people paying attention know number 1's Florida, right? They move up 3 spots. I don't think Florida's been number 1 this year. Let me take a quick look here. Oh, right. Yeah, I ripped the pages out. I can look back here all I want. I just rip the pages out and I keep them stored somewhere. So they moved. They were number 4 week 15 and week 16. They were number 3 week 14. This is week 17 and they're number 1. The Florida Panthers, the way that they dominated Colorado tonight. The way that Florida is playing hockey right now should scare everybody. I think the Florida Panthers have got it together. They've got some ridiculous record. Aren't they like 18-3-2 or something like that over their last 23 games? They've got some insane record. And, yeah, they're playing really, really well. They're now within 3 points of Boston. So, yes, Boston's still ahead of them, but Florida's made up some ground, and I would not be surprised to see them pass them. Which, of course, then begs the question of, do you really want to finish first in the NHL, right? As there's the possibility that maybe Florida ends up being number 1 overall, and we know they were there back in 2022, and it didn't work out for them that way. So, we'll see how it works out this year. All right, there you go. You guys are all caught up. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event that you haven't done so already. I forgive you. You can make up for it now. Thank you guys so much for all your support. And again, for anybody that I met in Anaheim, anybody that I met at the game that night against San Jose, thank you guys so much. The encouragement that I get from people when I'm out in public is just, it means the world to me. It really does. It gives me a chance to, when I get out of this room and I meet people who actually watch my videos, I'm like, wow, these people really do watch. So it does have a dramatic impact on my mood, and on a day like today where it's hockey all day, it really helps. So thank you guys for the encouragement. It means a lot, and we will be back in California at some point soon. So we have a little girl that wants to ride a Zamboni, and apparently that can happen. So now that she knows that can happen, we have to go back to California before she runs away to go to California. So thank you guys for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.